Good evening. I'm delighted to see so many of you joining us tonight to meet a very special guest, Tommy Schnurmacher, author of a totally engaging family memoir entitled Makeup Tips from Auschwitz: How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. I'm Leslie Maitland, chair of the Washington Hebrew Amram Scholar Series. This evening's program, however, is sponsored by the Temple's Vibrant Empty Nesters and Boomer groups, in cooperation with the Jewish Book Council. Cantor Manovich asked me to moderate this event because of my personal affinity with Tommy's story. As many of you know, I too have written a memoir, Crossing the Borders of Time, that focuses on my mother's experiences as a survivor of Hitler's Europe. What struck me in particular reading Tommy's story is the way that children of Holocaust survivors feel a mission to protect their parents and to make their parents' lives happier, a recognition that they had already suffered enough. The flip side of that is an ever-present sense of anxiety on both sides of the parent-child relationship that tragedy can strike at any time. And if I tell you that I once called the police to my mother's apartment in Florida simply because she didn't answer the telephone, that is a story that Tommy no doubt can top. The deep mother-son love that shines through every page of his book makes it a warm and thoroughly uplifting story, funny and brimming over with anecdotes about his lovely Hungarian mother, who makes sure that she knows she resembles no one more than Elizabeth Taylor. He tells it in 51 short chapters that he calls pieces, and they are indeed like pieces of candy. Tommy, born in Budapest, is an award-winning broadcaster and political pundit. He was the host of a 3-hour daily talk show for 20 years, more than 20 years, in station CJAD in Montreal, where he resides. He also wrote a column for the Montreal Gazette, and for 13 years, he covered the Academy Awards for both of them. And you can just imagine who he smuggled in to the star-studded chamber in Tinseltown to enjoy the evening with him. Tommy will talk to us tonight for about a half an hour, and then we'll open the session for your questions. You may either submit them in writing through the chat box, and I'll pose them for you, or else you can either wave your hand, or you can, even better, electronically use the hand wave function below the participants list at the upper right of the chat box on your screen. We'll be taking questions in order, and we'll unmute your audio when I call on you, but please keep them short so that we can take many. In the chat box, you'll also find a direct link to purchase Tommy's book through our Mitzvah Mall on Amazon, and I really highly recommend it. It's bound to lift your spirits even in these stressful times. Our evening tonight will be facilitated by our able Temple staff, Rich Gordon and Beth Donaldson, making sure that all things tech go right. Now you can message Rich through the chat box if you experience any problems, or else email him at rgordon@whctemple.org and he'll help you out. So now we're ready to turn to you, Tommy.
Well, thank you very much for that beautiful, warm introduction. I'm absolutely thrilled. This is my Washington debut, my American debut. So l'chaim to everybody who's listening and watching. People ask me, how did the book get started? What made you write this book? And when I used to work at that radio station, the news director, he and I would chat. He'd finish doing the news, and during the commercial break, we'd chat. And he'd say, I tell him stories about my family. And he said, Tommy, one of these days, you're going to have to write a book about your family. There's such interesting stories. So I decided to take his advice and do just that. And this story, the book tells a story about how my mother got 2 world-famous Nazis to save her life. But it's really more about the impact that had on our relationship. Now, the title is unusual. It's Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. Somebody was talking to me about the book and telling me that the book was lying around the house. And this lady's daughter came home and said, "Oh, I was so thrilled, Mom, you finally have a book on makeup." And then she saw what the book was, and it wasn't exactly makeup. Now, the title, Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. How could you put those two things together, makeup and Auschwitz? The two don't go together. Well, in my mother's case, they went together. I recall stories of that my mom was telling me when she and her sister would be walking in Szerencs, which is a little shtetl, a little village in Hungary. And she and her sister would be saying, "Oh, you know what? Nothing interesting is happening to us. There's not much interesting happening." And a few weeks later, she and her sister were on a cattle car hurtling towards Auschwitz. And she would tell me this story, and I found out when I was very little, when I was very young, I asked her about the tattoo on her arm. So I knew at a very early age. And she would tell me the story, and this is a very important part. When she got there, her reaction was she jumped off the train, and then the first Nazi to save her life was Mengele. It was choosing, do they go to the left, do they go to the right? She was young, she was beautiful. She could go to the right to work in the camp. And when she got there, get this, my mother did not like the way the outfit they gave her looked. She felt it was the wrong size. She was not happy with it. So what did she do? She exchanged her meager ration of bread for needle and thread, and she sewed up the outfit so that it fit properly, just the way she wanted. She pinched her cheeks so that they'd be red, but then she looked at the shoes that her father had just bought her for the Shavuot holiday. They're brand new. And she was very upset that they didn't look new, that they were scuffed. So she wanted to do something about that. So what did she do about that? She took the swill that they served as coffee. Instead of drinking it, she used it to polish the shoes. So there she is in a dress that fits, cheeks blushed, shoes shined, and there's the morning Zählapell, or roll call. And then Irma Greza, on whom they based the character Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, did the morning roll call of all of the Jews in the camp, of all of the women in the camp. She was in charge of the women. And my mother stood out. The other women told her, "You shouldn't be standing out." But she stood out and she said, "You come here." And she asked, "How come a Jew looks like this in a place like this?" And my mother told her the truth, told her exactly what she had done, that she polished her shoes and the dress didn't fit right and that she sewed it up. And so there's a pause. And during that pause, Greza could shoot her, kill her, do anything to her, or not. And Greza said, "Oh, in that case, if you're so clean and so neat, you can be my personal valet." And she became her personal valet, tending to her garden, cleaning her boots, etc. And that's how she survived. At the end of the war, the Polish women wanted to kill Greza, and she managed to escape. The British caught her, and she was hanged for war crimes. But just to give you an idea of what my mother is like, my mother always told me that this woman, Greza, was very beautiful and that she looked like Ingrid Bergman. And one day I'm in Atlanta, and I'm going to the Holocaust Museum. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a very small, it's not like the one in Washington. It's a very small museum. And I'm walking through, and I see some pictures, some sepia pictures. And I look, there's three ladies standing there, and just look closely. And I said, one of the women looks like Ingrid Bergman. So I read the caption underneath, and it says Irma Greza. I can't believe it. I said, that's the woman who saved my mother's life. Wow. So I rushed back to the hotel. I called my mother on the phone. Guess what? I saw a picture of, I'm in Atlanta. I saw a picture of Greza. She says, "You're in Atlanta? Did you go to CNN and the Coca-Cola Museum?" And it was for her, she'd gone past Greza despite what had happened. Now, what was going through mentally in my mother's mind in Auschwitz, when she like talked back even to Nazis. There's a lot of other people she talked back to over the course of the years. We can talk about that later during the question and answer period. But she wanted to tell them, you are saying I'm a Jew, I'm nothing, I'm dirty, I'm nobody. And she was saying to them, no, no, I am somebody. I care. I have meaning. There's a reason for my existence. I have pride in myself. I have dignity in myself. And they could take her freedom, but they couldn't take her dignity. Now, Dan, in the first chapter of the book, I talk about what happened. She wakes me up one morning when I'm 6 o'clock and says, we're going on an adventure. The adventure is we're going across landmines and escaping Hungary during the middle of the Hungarian Revolution. And by the way, I was told I could have only bring very few toys. So I decided on two, my wooden streetcar that I had and a little mandolin. And my mother said, sorry, you can't bring two, only one. You have to choose one. The streetcar, the mandolin, which one am I going to take? Well, I said, the streetcar is just wood. It just sits there. It doesn't do anything. I'm going to take the mandolin. And I take the mandolin, and then this guard who's taking us across the border, the guy who put down the landmines, then accepted bribes from people to take them through the landmines across the border to escape. And so my father was paying somebody to carry me. My father decided that since Montreal, Canada, the streets in America, North America, the streets were paved with gold. So bringing gold and silver, that wouldn't do any good, but fake plastic. Now that was very rare in Hungary. He'd bring some of that. So I was being carried across the border in the middle of the night through these muddy minefields. And I decide to strum the mandolin a little. And of course, they take the mandolin and break it over my head because, of course, if anybody hears it, the Russian soldiers around are going to kill us. So that was the end of my musical career. That ended right then and there. Now, when I've been talking about the book came out last August. When I've been talking about the book, one of the places that asked me to speak was at a synagogue here in Montreal. And before I was speaking, before the rabbi introduced me, but before the rabbi came on, a gentleman came on and he said, you know what, it's just before the high holidays. And it's very, very important for everybody, because there's a large group of people who are there, for you to know that you should buy tickets for the high holiday services. I know you think you feel it's expensive and it's only for 3 days, but keep in mind, we're here for you the whole year. So I'm listening to this just before I go on, and it reminded me of a story that I had completely forgotten about my mom. And my father was a rabbi in Hungary. When he came to Canada, there was not much call for rabbis who didn't speak English or French. So he worked as a peddler, but gradually opened up a tiny little synagogue, a little shtibel. And my mother was in charge of the tickets and doing the reservations and who would sit where. And I recall to this day, she'd have these big pieces of cardboard, the top ticket, the middle ticket, the smaller ticket for the men and for the ladies. And she'd write diagonally all of their names, Mrs. Oppenheim, Mrs. Goldberg, Mrs. Katz. She'd write their names in the people who are coming into these little boxes. So one day a call comes in. Mrs. Schnurmacher, I want to buy a ticket for the high holidays, but I don't want to go for the whole thing. I want to go just for the Yisker, the memorial prayer. And my mother says, did you see the movie Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton? I love that movie. My favorite part of that movie is the love scene when Richard Burton is kissing Elizabeth Taylor. I love that scene. If I go to the Van Horn Theater and I want to see just the love scene, how much is the ticket? So she said the ticket is the same price whether you're staying for just the Yisker services or for all of it. Now, when we came to Canada, we moved from Hungary, we went to Austria, then flew on a plane stopped in Iceland and Greenland, and we arrived in Moncton, New Brunswick, and came by train to Montreal. And when we were in Montreal, one day I'm going to school, grade one. I'm all of 6 years old, 7 years old. And my mother says, you can't go to school this morning. Why not? She said, it's too cold. I said, what do you mean it's too cold? I said, all the other kids are going. How come all the other kids can go? She said, because Canadians don't love their children. She told me. So I believe that. I figured, okay. Now, in terms of being overprotective, in Canada, in Montreal, hockey is very big, and children like to play hockey, and they go to the ice rink in the neighborhood. And my father, though he didn't have a lot of money, bought me some skates, and I was all excited. I was going to go to the park and learn how to skate. And my mother's watching all of this. She's not saying anything. She's not commenting. And she says, okay, you can take him to go skating, and he will fall down and hit his head and break his head, and the skull will open, and the blood and the brains will flow out, all the red soaking the ice. And I'm listening to this as a 7-year-old age. I'm not, I threw the skates away. I ran out of the room. No skating. So my musical career had already ended. My skating career ended on that particular day. Now, in terms of being overprotective, as a child of Holocaust survivors, you feel that it is your job to protect them because something so bad happened to them. How could any problem you have compare to that? So you don't tell them your problems. That's number one. Number two, you feel you can't, they can't take care of themselves. You've got to help. They don't understand Canada. They don't understand the new world. They understand the old world. So when a document comes in, an official document, you have to read it. You have to translate it. You have to explain it to them, even when you're very young. I remember, I think it was November 15th, 1976, there was a referendum in Quebec and about whether Quebec should separate. And it was a big political thing. No, sorry, the referendum came much later in 96. This was when the Parti Québécois, the separatist party, was first elected, a nationalist separatist party. So my mother calls me up, she said, do we have to move? I said, no, it's not the same. It's not so bad. You don't have to move. I said, tomorrow will be exactly the same as yesterday. There will be no problem. And thank God there was no problem. But in terms of overprotection, I mean, when I call my mother and there'd be no answer on the first ring, well, I understand, she's busy somewhere. Okay. Second ring, I still understand. Third ring, fourth ring, no answer, must mean she's dead. Those are the two possibilities, right? Answer the phone, dead. You catastrophize, you go straight to catastrophe. So what happened eventually, what I did is, because of all these cabs I was taking back and forth, she lived in one part of town, I lived downtown, I moved into the same building where I live now. I live in a condo right now. I'm speaking to in a condominium on the 3rd floor. Mom lived on the 12th floor. So I could go check on her. No answer on the phone, get in the elevator, press 12. I can find out what's going on. I was always super protective of her as well, and protective of my sister. When I go out with my mother somewhere, and then it was time for her to go home, never mind put her on a bus, never mind put her in a cab. No. I get in the cab with her. I accompany her on the cab ride to her house, wait and accompany her up the stairs, and when she's inside the house and the door is locked, then I can go back out, get back in the cab, and go back home. This is not so much to protect her, it's to keep me from going crazy, because I would be so worried if anything would be wrong. So again, just another indication of being very overprotective. As a kid, I loved to read, and I still do, and I found out that the Jewish Public Library in Montreal had this program way back when, we're talking about the 1960s, where if you were a child, for 5 cents, you could become a member of the library, which would mean you could take out 3 books for free and read them for 2 weeks, and then you could bring them back, and then they would let you have another 3 books for free. At the time, I thought I'd never heard of a better deal in my life than this. So I had a nickel, so I went over and I went to the Jewish Public Library, plunked down my nickel on the desk and said, can I go look for the books now? She said, yes, but you have to have your parents sign the card. Oh, they weren't home. It was around 10 in the morning. They weren't coming back till much later. I didn't want to wait around now that I found this unbelievable bargain. So what did I do? I went down on the corner of Mount Royal and St. Urban in Montreal, in case there are any Montrealers who've joined the discussion. And I stood on that corner and asked strangers to forge my mother's signature. And I was turned down one after the other till I finally found a lady with long, long hair. And she thought this was, she'd never been approached by a young child to forge the parent's signature. She thought it was very unusual, and she did it for me, and I slowly spelled out the name for her, S-C-H. And then with the forged signature, I went up to the library and I got my books. Now, at the time I went to an element, my father was a rabbi, wanted to send me to a yeshiva. And my mother said, no, he has to learn to speak English first. So she says, send him to the yeshiva in grade 2. Grade 1, she sent me to Bancroft School, a public school. And at that public school, the first day, I don't speak a word of English. I'm sitting in a class surrounded by 28, 30 kids, and the teacher's talking, she's saying things. I have no idea what she's saying. I have no clue what she's talking about. What am I going to do? So I look to the right, and then all of a sudden I see the teachers handing out, everybody gets a piece of paper and everybody gets a pencil. And I said, are they going to draw? I mean, I don't know, what are we going to do with the pencil and the paper? So she's talking and talking and talking again. I have no idea what she's talking about. I don't speak one word of English. Then the girl next to me, she's picking up the pencil and she's starting to write. And she writes M-A-R-I-E. So I pick up my pencil and I write M-A-R-I-E. She'd written her name in the corner of the paper. I wrote her name in the corner of the paper because I had no idea what it was all about. The teacher at the time felt very sorry for me as an immigrant child. One day I was crying because I'd forgotten my lunch at home, and she said she'd take me out to a snack bar just around the corner from the school. And she says, Tommy, would you like a hot dog? I think, no, even in Canada, it can't really be. It's not a hot dog. It's not going to be like an actual dog. It must be the name of a candy. I'm thinking it's the name of a candy. So the hot dog arrives, and I look down at it. Oh, it's meat. It's not kosher. So if I eat it, of course I'll die, right? So what am I going to do? So I ask the teacher, Miss Wadman, I remember her name to this day, what's that over there? And I point to something on top of the restaurant near the ceiling. And while she's looking there, I take the hot dog and throw it on the floor. And she says, Tom, you're very hungry. Would you like another hot dog? So I had to figure out how to get rid of the second hot dog as well. And this kosher thing was something else. We lived in a building where there's a Ukrainian family who lived just upstairs from us. And I was visiting them for lunch, and we were having steak, and the kid says he's thirsty. So his mother says, okay. And she goes to the fridge, takes a bottle of milk and pours him a glass of milk. And she's walking with the milk towards him to where the steak is. And I'm in absolute horror. So I knock down his glass of milk. I run shrieking out of the apartment to tell my mother that she has to call the police because the mommy upstairs wants to she's trying to poison her son by having him drink milk and meat together, which of course I knew as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old, that was like out of the question. Now, as I was saying about being overprotective when it's protective of parents, part of the reason that you're protective of parents like that is you want to undo the Holocaust. It's so unfair. You want it not to have happened. You want to fix it. You can't fix the Holocaust. So what I try to do is keep my problems away from mom and make her as that my job was to make her happy. And occasionally she would say, your job is to make me happy. It's later on, through many, many years of psychotherapy, I figured out that no, actually that isn't my job. One's job as a child is to actually be a child. I found this out when I was 48, so it took me a while to figure that out. But I decided I'm going to take Mom. She was crazy about Elizabeth Taylor. It was unbelievable. In the bedroom, we had pictures, all kinds of pictures of relatives. And slowly, one after the other, the relative pictures disappeared. My father's family first, and then her own family, all gone, all replaced by Elizabeth Taylor, and occasionally Richard Burton, but mainly Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, so I decided I learned how to speak English reading Movie Mirror and Photoplay. We'd go to the magazine store, I'd buy those movie magazines, and we'd watch movies late at night. We stayed up till 12, 1 in the morning. And we watched the movies, and I'd look up, try to find the person in the movie magazine, and that's how I learned how to speak English, reading movie magazines with her. So I decided to go to the Oscars, but I couldn't afford to go to the Oscars, but I was working for a radio station and a newspaper. So I told the newspaper that the radio station was picking up the airplane tickets, would they pick up the hotel? And I told the newspaper the opposite. So both of them ended up, neither knew, but both of them ended up paying for it. That was the first year I went. The second year, I didn't ask them anything. I just bought the tickets, booked the hotel, and then gave them the bill afterwards. And they said, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, we do this every year. It's a tradition." And that tradition went on for 13 years. Now, in one of those years, and I know the year it was because it was one of the first times they delayed the Oscars because it was the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And it was like, we had to stay an extra night, but there was no extra time to stay in the hotel. And so I had to go downstairs to explain that I took my mother with me. So my mother was with me. And I had to explain that we can't leave because the Oscars are delayed, and say, "I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing we can do. We're fully booked." I said, "Oh, no, you don't understand. She's Hungarian, and the film that is being nominated for best foreign film is Hungarian. So that's why she has to be here." So they took it for granted that she was somehow associated with the film. She wasn't. The film was Hungarian. She was Hungarian. But that was the only thing. But anyway, we got to stay that extra day. Now, I didn't only take her to Hollywood where the Oscars were taking place. I took her to the actual award ceremonies at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. And my friend Denny Arar, who worked for Associated Press, she said, "You know what? I'm covering the arrivals, and then another reporter is going to cover the actual event. So how about give your mother, I'll give your mother, when I leave, I'll give your mother my pass." Okay, so she covered the arrivals, and then she left, gave my mother the pass. So there's Mom and I standing outside the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion as Mary Tyler Moore and Goldie Hawn and Robert Redford and all kinds of celebrities are arriving. And then Denny comes back and she says, "The other reporter called in sick. I have to cover the whole event, so I need my press pass back." Well, it's her press pass, right? So I give her the press pass back, and then what we did is we sort of, I had the press pass, and I put it on, and then then I give it to my mother, and then she put it on, and it was back and forth, and then after a few minutes, a very tall 6'4" black Los Angeles cop comes up, looks at her, looks at me, says, "Which one of you is Tommy Schnurmacher?" He says, "Officer, he is Tommy Schnurmacher. It's my fault, but don't worry. I will go away. I don't have a pass. I will walk home alone by myself late at night, dangerous Los Angeles, but don't worry about it. I'm so sorry I caused you any trouble." And needless to say, he was completely charmed, puts his arm around her, and takes both of us over to where we can get a better view of the crowd arriving. I cover it for my newspaper and for the radio station. And towards the end, after Best Picture and Best Director, that year, Robert Redford won for Ordinary People. It's time for the media to ask questions, right? These are reporters and journalists from across the country, across the US, from Canada, from around the world. And they're waiting for the first question. And Robert Redford is such a big superstar in right there, such a big superstar that he's that they're afraid to ask the first question. They're actually afraid to ask the first question. So no one's asking the question. Who asked the question? Who raises their hand? My mom. Mr. Redford, now that you won the Oscar and Best Director, are you going to run for president? And so he was absolutely charmed, and then everybody laughed, and it went on. I also took her with me to the Cannes Film Festival. And at the Cannes Film Festival, I took her to a restaurant, Moulin de Mougins, which is the best restaurant in the south of France. I don't know if it's still open. And she couldn't understand why we're taking a cab to a restaurant in another little town. Why aren't we eating? Isn't there a restaurant closer by? I said, yes, there are many restaurants closer by. But Mom, this is a very special occasion. You don't come to the south of France that often. We're taking you to Moulin de Mougins. It's a very special restaurant. We get there. She's looking around. She sees Omar Sharif at another table. I said, no. You can't bother her. Can't bother Omar Sharif. You can't go over to celebrities. You have to leave them alone. They expect their privacy. I haven't finished saying this. I see not her face, her back, the back of her head. She's already walking towards, paying no attention to me, walking over to Omar Sharif's table. I said, oh no, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't. I'm afraid she's going to be thrown out. I don't know what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to get her. I look over there. I sneak over. I look over there, and what is she doing? I see Omar Sharif going to another table to borrow a chair, bringing the chair over to his table and having her sit down. And then I see that he's putting his hand into her hand like this. And Mom is starting to read his palm. She's reading his palm and everybody else's palm at the table. Now here's the interesting part. She doesn't read palms. She doesn't know how to read palms, but she did and kept them thoroughly entertained. And I ate my dinner at Moulin de Mougins by myself. And she had a great time with Omar Sharif. The following day, she said, I don't listen to you. The following day, she said that Omar Sharif likes to gamble and we should go to the casino. So I said, okay, we'll go to the casino. And then we get to the casino. I said, oh, wait a second. When we play blackjack at home and you cheat, Daddy and I think it's very funny and it's cute. Over here at the casino, the municipal casino in Cannes, if you cheat, you're going to be arrested. You can't do that. So she didn't. Another time, this is mind-boggling, the story. I took her to this is just incredible. I know how many people know how to play blackjack, but if you do, you'll really appreciate this. I took her to the casino in Montreal. And we're sitting at the blackjack table, and there's 7 people. I'm number 6, she's number 7. She's at the end. And everybody's trying to get 21 and not go over 21, and you're playing against the dealer. And people have put quite a bit of money on the table. And we come to her, and she's got a 17. Now, when you got a hand, a 17, that's considered pretty good. And everybody who knows how to play blackjack just, okay, I'll stay with 17 and hope that the dealer goes over. What happens? Mom says, I want another card. And so they all look at her like she's out of her mind. What are you talking? It's my money and I want another card. So the dealer says, okay, he puts down a 4. So she has 21, right? And she says, you see, to the rest of the table. Now what happens with the dealer? He had a 10 underneath. His next card is a 10. So he's got 20. He's beaten everybody at the table, but her. Had she stood her ground, had she kept 17, he would have gotten 10, plus 4 is 14, plus 10, 24. He would have been over, and everybody at the table would have won. I had to ask security to accompany us out of the casino because the other 6 people wanted to kill her, right? So that was the story at the local casino. When my mom was at the Jewish Elder Care Center in Montreal, I used to visit her every Friday and every Sunday afternoon. It's very interesting. At the end, like at the end of the visit, whenever I'd say goodbye, she said, have a good life. Have a good life. which was always very reassuring. I thought to myself, God forbid if this was the last time, that's her message to me, you know, have a good life. Now, I'm going to read to you one little story to add, but before I get to the story, it's a story about the tenant in case I forget that. But I want to read you a brief selection from the book called it's called The Last of the Hungarians. After Mom had her regular checkup, her doctor suggested I might want to take her to the geriatric clinic for some tests. Why on earth would I want to take her to some geriatric clinic? She's not that old. She's certainly not geriatric. The doctor looked at me the way B. Arthur used to look at Betty White. I figured you're around 60, and since she's your mother, I jumped to the radical conclusion she's probably a bit older than you are. Everyone's a comedian. We left his office, but I did, however, decide to take Mom to that clinic, not right away, you understand, about a year later. After having her pulse checked and blood pressure measured, Mom was required to answer some questions. Do you know who is the Prime Minister of Canada? Yes, I do. Who is he? Stephen Harper, of course. You're a doctor and you don't know who is the Prime Minister of Canada. Maybe you're not a good doctor. I do know. I'm asking you these questions to see how good your memory is. My memory is excellent. I still remember going to Auschwitz where they shaved off my head and gave me a tattoo. What do you remember? This was not going well. I figured I better do something to distract Mom. Maybe after this appointment, Mom, we can go shopping. Do you want to go shopping? Yes, but first we have to finish with this doctor who has a bad memory. Just a few minutes and we're done, madam. Here's a piece of paper and a pencil. Write down a full sentence. Any sentence that you like. Take your time. Mom took the pencil, paused, looked at me, and wrote something on the paper and handed it to the doctor. Your mother has no problem writing a sentence. What did she write? I love my son. After the appointment, the doctor told me my mother was fine. She just had a mild case of dementia. Nothing to worry about. What a quack. How could he have even mentioned my mother and the D word in the same sentence? Before I hired her live-in caregiver, there are quite a few I'd hired on a part-time basis, some more successful than others. Mom told one bossy caregiver she really didn't like that she should find other employment. The woman was very, very short, a very, very short lady. She said, I am sure they would pay you big money to work in the circus and you can get to travel. Why be stuck here with me? Most of the time, most of the help I hired, they were from the Philippines. One morning, I bumped into a kind, smiling gentleman who'd been good friends with my dad, and he ran an agency that provided caregivers on a part-time basis, and he told me about Iboya, who had just arrived from the Hungarian countryside. She spoke very little English, but she was strong, not too old, and apparently a great cook. She was ready to show up the next day, which was a Saturday. I didn't have a chance to interview her. She arrived at the building just as I was leaving for Seoul. I introduced myself and told her I was sure she and my mother would get along very well. That morning, my prayers were more intense than usual as I repeatedly asked the master of the universe to intervene to make sure everything worked out with Mom and Iboya. My prayers went unanswered. I arrived home to see Mom sitting on the lobby couch, scowling at Iboya with a look that bordered on loathing. Good Shabbos on you. How are you? Borzasto, I will feel much better when this kurva goes home. Tell her to go home. She said all this while glaring at Iboya, who looked like she was no longer surprised at being called a kurva. I make your mother nice lunch and she love it. I didn't love it. I did not have lunch. Look at her. Look at those sagging breasts, so big. If she leans over, they fall into the soup. Who has breasts so large? She looks like a cow from Pasto. Tell her to go home. Tell her to go to hell. Iboya, would you like to take a break? Sure. She left and Mom thanked me for getting rid of her. I hope she never comes back. She has to come back. Somebody has to stay with you tonight. They do? Yes, they do. You'll be safe and I'll be less nervous. Let me take you upstairs. You can have a nap and Iboya will be back later. I'm exhausted and I want to rest. I was contentedly dreaming when suddenly awakened by a frantic banging on the door. It was Mom. 3 hours and the curva is still not back. Iboya didn't come back? No. She was supposed to come back. I was told she was very reliable. I hope she's all right. I'm going to call the agency tonight to find out what happened. Maybe she had an accident. She's too fat to have an accident. Later, I did catch up with Iboya. Why didn't you come back from your break? I did come back. Your mother say I am fired. I try to open door. She starts screaming. She throw my purse in the hallway. She slam door. She say if I knock again, she call Interpol and say I am spy. I was aghast. I told her it's your son who hired me. She told me then go to his house and take care of him. Iboya was the last of the Hungarians. Now, one little story, and then we can get to the questions. My mother, father lived at one point in a duplex in Montreal. They lived downstairs and they had tenants upstairs. And one day the phone rings, and it's the tenant. Mrs. Schnurmacher, there's no heat. Move to Florida. My mother says. The tenant calls back and says, I'm serious, there's no heat. Well, don't walk around naked like a tsatskele and close the window. Still not over. The woman calls the police. The police arrive. They ring the bell. Yes, it's the Montreal police, madam. We have a complaint. What's the complaint? Your tenant says there's no heat. What are you? The heat police. Go catch a crook. And my father perked up and said, who was that? My mother said, somebody selling chocolate. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tommy, that was terrific. I must say that hearing you tell these stories with your accent, it just adds to the wonderful liveliness of your stories. And I hope that you are going to be the one to narrate an audio version of the book.
Yes, I'm going to do the audiobook, yes.
Really, that's great. That's wonderful. As everyone can tell, Tommy definitely inherited his mother's ability to what should we say, to connive shenanigans, to work out a way around most situations and problems. And the funny thing I found is in reading an interview with Tommy in the Montreal Gazette, I discovered that not only was he good at tricking other people, but he was also excellent at tricking himself. And as someone who has known what it is to force oneself to have to sit and try to write a book, I wanted Tommy to share this story of how he motivated himself to stick to the task at hand in writing this book.
Okay, well, at the first part, I always had a deadline of working at a radio station or working for a newspaper, so that was no problem. But to write a book, I mean, I could write it whenever I wanted to, so I had no deadline. So what I did is I promised to have a certain amount done by noon every day and post it on Facebook, which I did for a selection of chapters. But, you know, at Costco, they give you a sample. They don't give away the whole roast. So what did I do after that? And I was wondering what I should do, and then I came up with this idea. I took a check and wrote out a check to re-elect Donald Trump Fund. I put that check into a small envelope. I put the small envelope with the check in it in a large envelope. And I took the large envelope to my friend Francine, gave it to my friend Francine, and I told her, if I don't send you an email of a chapter written every day by noon, you have to take an envelope, a small envelope out of this big envelope and go right away to the post office and mail it. The big envelope is still there. The small envelope is still there. The check is still there. I didn't miss a single day, and that's what kept me going.
That is a great story. I love it. Now, let's see. Do we have any questions yet from people on screen? Rich, any questions? Linda Singer has a question.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say what a fantastic presentation this was. I have read your book, and I literally was calling friends and reading them parts of your book.
Oh,
Your
wow. Thank
mother's
you.
chutzpah is unrivaled until tonight, hearing yours. Now I'm not
Okay.
so sure.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Now, in a more serious vein here, you pose a question as the son of a rabbi, and more importantly, as the son of Holocaust survivors, of what it took for people to believe in God, to remain so observantly Jewish as your parents did, following their experience in the camps. Your mother was at Auschwitz, your father at Mauthausen. Both of them, I read, lost their parents. And you posed the question there to your father at one point, where was God during the Holocaust? Can you discuss, how your father dealt with that question, or your mother? It's such an important question.
It is a very important question. And I once took my father to a Chabad evening where this was many, many years ago before their grand rabbi passed away. And they were talking about the Messiah, the coming of Messiah. When is Mashiach going to come? That was their big topic. And so my father's sitting beside me, and he says, I have a question. I said, go ahead, Daddy, ask it. He said, no, I'm too shy. My English isn't good enough. You ask it for me. So the question he asked was, as we're waiting for the Messiah, wouldn't have just before the Holocaust been a good time for his arrival? Wouldn't that have been an ideal time to arrive? So I asked that question, and the two rabbis up on the dais at front, their response was, that's the first question we're going to ask him. And my father said to me, he said, that is the only acceptable answer. In other words, when people say, why did the Holocaust happen? My father said, the only acceptable answer to that is we don't know. What kept him going, the motivation that kept him going was he saw so many people, so many of his relatives and friends killed, and especially when it was in the labor battalions. He wanted to make sure they weren't forgotten. So when he did his synagogue, he started his little synagogue in Montreal. It was called the Hungarian Memorial Synagogue. And what he did is he had these little plaques put up, right? All the members could put up a plaque of their relatives who were killed in the Holocaust. And my father signed a contract with this, like he gave the building to his board of directors. And he said, listen, you keep the building, I'll give it to you in exchange for a 15-year contract. The 15-year contract lasted 35 years that he was the rabbi of that congregation. When it ended, when he was in an accident and it ended, because when he called, they'd all come. When he stopped calling, they stopped going. By the way, these were people who never wanted to set foot in the synagogue after Holocaust. He managed to fill it up on the high holidays because he spoke Hungarian. He related to them like their families. They remembered their families when they heard him speaking in Hungarian. So what they did, he put their names up on this plaque all across one wall of the synagogue. When the synagogue was sold, when they'd amalgamated with another synagogue, my father said, I don't care which synagogue you amalgamate with. I don't care about the money. He said, I don't care who you give the Sefer Torahs to, the Torah scrolls to. There has to be one thing in the contract that is non-negotiable. The names of all of the people here have to be in the new synagogue. They have to find a place for all these names in the new synagogue. Because like to his last minute, that they couldn't be these people that many of whom he personally buried and said Kaddish for, that they should not be forgotten. That was his motivation. Mom's motivation for believing in God is she asked God, she says, if I die, they'll be too happy, the Nazis. Make them unhappy. That was her motivation. You know, she wanted to survive, to frustrate the Nazi world. That was what the motivation that kept her going.
So I must say, the whole time when I was studying the Holocaust period and researching my mother's experiences, I kept thinking back then, well, thank God this could never happen here. And my mother used to say to me, don't kid yourself. It could happen here. And, starting with Charlottesville and the Tree of Life shootings and so many things that have happened in recent years, I've come to feel like I sort of owe her an apology. I see that it can happen here, and things can go very strangely awry under a leader who can foment discord. How did your mother feel in Canada? Did she ever feel that it was possible that it could happen?
Yes, she also absolutely. She loved Canada and she loved the freedom of it and she appreciated it. And when they did a census once and they asked her what her nationality was, she said Canadian. And they said, what kind of Canadian? She says Canadian. Like she was very much a proud Canadian, happy to be here in a free country. But in terms of could the Holocaust happen again, did she think? Yes, she felt that it could. In other words, that she explained that it was the neighbors, it was people who were nice to you and who you were nice to who did it, who helped the Germans, who had the Jews prepared for the Hungarian non-Jews had the Jews prepared for them before Germany asked for them. So she very much thought it could happen. And I'm on the board of some organization called the Genocide Foundation here in Montreal. And its entire goal is to get schools in Quebec, high schools in Quebec, to teach the subject of the Holocaust and genocide. That's the entire purpose of the organization. So when I became a member of the board, I was reading some of the background material, and I was reading the 6 or 7 conditions for genocide. And when you read them, it's absolutely, utterly terrifying to see it. It really is.
Wow.
In terms of how many have been met. And one of the guest speakers we had was a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, who said that literally it happens from 1 minute to the next.
Cool. That's really cool.
I think, wait a minute.
Okay, any
Rich,
other
you're having a little problem there, huh?
We took care of it.
Okay, thanks. So Tommy, can you talk a little bit about the second generation survivor groups that exist in different places? Is there one in Montreal that you're involved with?
Yes. There's some, I think, in every city. There's a group in Washington called Generations After Washington, D.C. I'm not sure their name. And there are many of these groups. The first time I heard about them, I thought to myself, what? Somebody's mother went to Auschwitz, was in Auschwitz, my mother was in Auschwitz, big deal. We have nothing in common. And then when I went to a meeting of a second generation, it was, whoa. We had a lot in common, being overprotective. Like what we thought was a normal household was not a normal household. Our parents did things that were outrageous, that I never thought, that I didn't think were outrageous, that I thought were perfectly normal. One day I was going to school and my mother told me, don't walk by yourself. Ira Silverstein's mother, grandmother, walks him to school every morning at the same time, right? Walks him to school every morning at the same time. Walk beside her, because she's going to the same school. So, okay. So in the middle of a snowstorm, I'm walking beside, there's Ira holding his grandmother's hand, there's his grandmother, and I'm sort of trailing behind next to the grandmother on the other side. And the grandmother tells me, go away, you refugee, right? She'd been born in Canada and she didn't like refugees moving into the neighborhood. So my mother sees this. My mother sees Ira's grandmother waving her hand like this, shooing me away. The next thing I see flying through the street is my mother in pom-pom slippers and a negligee in the snow, running from our house on Clark Street to where I am with Ira's grandmother, and she punches her and knocks her out into the snow. She knocked out, and then she took me home, and I didn't go to school that day. We went shopping at the department store. But I mean, like that in terms of protective, like she said, and then she told me that was the wrong thing to do. That is that, but she said she couldn't control herself when she saw her son being treated like that.
I must say, everything that you described so resonates with me. My mother used to come to my house. If I drove her home, it took 8 minutes for me to get back, and the phone would be ringing incessantly. I would come in the door and she'd say, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "Why do you say that?" She said, "I've been calling you for 5 minutes." I said, "It takes me 10 minutes to get home. Why have you been calling me for 5?" Same thing.
When I in high school, I won a scholarship, and the scholarship was a $10 gift certificate at a bookstore. And my friend's mother, Howard Carroll's mother, drove Howard and me to the department store downtown to pick up our books with our gift certificates. When we come home on the radio station that I would later be on, right, CJD, we hear on the air that Tommy Schnurmacher has been missing for 2 days, that a young boy has been missing, high school boy has been missing for 2 days. And Howard's mother says, "What on earth is that?" And so she brings me upstairs to my mother and said, "What's she?" And my mother says, "Scream, oh, finally, I thought you were dead." Howard's mother says, "Did you call the police?" Yes. "Why did you call the police? We just went to get a book." I said, "Why did you tell them he was missing for 2 days?" I said, you think they would have gone to look for him if I told them he was missing for an hour? And another quick story that just occurred to me, she had, right in this building on which was on the 12th floor, she had a dog, a little Maltese. She had a Maltese because Elizabeth Taylor had a Maltese. So she had to have a Maltese. And it was barking, and you could hear it in the entire building. And there's a park outside the building. If you sit outside in the park, you could hear the dog barking on the 12th floor in the building. And so they called the police, the local municipal police, who came in. She says, "Why is your dog barking?" My mother says, "Because it's not a cat." Was her answer.
Absolutely funny. Well, did your mother talk to you much about her parents or her growing up? And the gradual changes that she saw in Hungary. Did you find yourself getting involved in history?
Yes, she did tell me, but the story she told me is that they lived a very good life in a small town in the steppe, and then they moved to Debrecen, and everybody got along very well. Like the Jewish community got along with the non-Jewish community in the town. There was no issue. Then the laws kept getting worse and worse and worse, but they still thought that what they heard was happening in the rest of Europe would not happen in Hungary. It couldn't possibly happen here, is what they said very much up to the last minute.
Now, we've had several requests for more information on the 7 conditions that you mentioned that are conducive to genocide. So I don't want you to have to rattle them off now, but I don't know if you want to we can post them somewhere, or
well, we can post them later. I don't have them with me.
But maybe if you send me an email.
I'm sure if you literally Googled it, 7 conditions, 6 conditions for genocide, you'd find the list. It's a common, it's very common knowledge. Well, not that common, because I didn't know about it either, but apparently it's common knowledge.
Yeah.
It was some of the background material they gave me.
Well, I don't know if you feel the way I do, but I feel that when you get involved in your family's history, in a way, it makes them eternal. And
yes.
The fact of having the book, there's a kind of a continuing presence that you feel so good about, that she and her foibles and intense personality are always very accessible, and that other people can participate in that as well.
Yes, I
feel. I was just going to say that I've been asked to tell the group that on the high holidays in Yom Kippur, I'm going to be leading a study session on how you can get involved in researching your own family's story. And people can find out more about this if you go to, just looking here, there's a website. It's the whctemple.org High Holiday 2020 website, and you can find out more about that study session and others that will take place on Zoom on Yom Kippur. Now, I would also like to say here that for anyone who wants to hear more of Tommy's terrific stories, you again will find a direct link to buy it through our Mitzvah Mall, and that Tommy will be happy to inscribe book plates for everybody's copies. So if you let us know how you would like the book plates to be inscribed and the address where you would like them sent, so then we can send the book plates to Tommy and he will send them back to me. So you should send your requests to Beth at bdonaldson at whctemple.org, and we'll put that in the chat box too. And before we close, I would like to ask Tommy to read one more brief section that is just totally epitomizes the feeling of wanting to make everything perfect for the parent that Tommy exemplifies so beautifully, and it shines through this book, the love that he has for her and the lengths that he goes to make her happy. So this is in the middle of the book, and
yes, it's the.
We'll read this little part.
Okay, this is the part. Yes, chapter 30, part of chapter 35. Yes, Mom decided to go to Toronto.
Toronto.
Mom decided to go to Toronto on a business trip on her own. My father and I took her to the airport, and on reaching the departures area, when my parents had to say goodbye, they started to hug one another and cry uncontrollably. Why are you two crying? Anya was not leaving to another continent to discover the new world. She was going to Toronto to meet with the editor of a small Hungarian Jewish newspaper. I may have sounded brave, but it was all an act. I was also worried. A few hours later, I was on the phone with the posh Sutton Place Hotel on Bay Street where Mom was staying. I was worried about her and called the hotel to make sure she was okay. Sutton Place, may I help you? Yes, I would like to know if Mrs. Schnurmacher has checked in yet. Oh, as a matter of fact, she's checking in right now. Would you like to speak to her? Yes, please. Hi, Mom, how was your flight? It was great. The cab driver was from Lebanon, and he said he loved Jewish people. He said I should not waste money at a hotel, and I should stay at his place. You're kidding me. He invited you to stay at his house? Yes, but I told him I did not think that was a very good idea. I convinced him Daddy was a big criminal, mafia man, 6 foot tall, in prison for armed robbery before he went to work for Mossad. He said that maybe then it was better if I stayed at the hotel. He even refused to take money for the taxi ride. I'm glad you're okay. Enjoy Toronto. Bye. I love you, Mom. Bye, Tomika. I love you. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Hi, Tomika. I'm hungry. Go ahead, order room service. I can't. I'm alone. I'm worried that when they bring up the food, they might come in and rape me. Good thinking. Leave it to me. What would you like to have? A salad and a cafe au lait. Not a problem. I'll order it to be delivered by a law-abiding non-rapist I know in Toronto. It'll be on a tray in 20 minutes in front of your door. I then called room service long distance to place the order. I'd like to order some food. Is it possible to order some flowers to be placed on the tray as well? Oh, yes, we can do that, sir. That's fine. Just one other thing. When the waiter takes it up to the room, do not knock on the door. Repeat, do not knock. Just leave the tray on the floor in front of the door. But who will sign for it? No one will sign for it. I will pay for it. Put it on my credit card. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Mom. Thank you, Tomika. The food was delicious, and your non-rapist friend even brought flowers. You have nice friends.
I have to say, just terrific. I urge everybody to read this book. It's just so, particularly these days, such a joy to experience. So I thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Tommy, for bringing us your wonderful mother. Thank you to—
Pleasure seeing you all. It was great I didn't get to meet you in person, but thank you all for attending.
I also want to thank Rich and Beth for making the event run so smoothly. And let you all know that we have a great roster of Jewish Book Council speakers scheduled throughout this year. So please do browse widely through our offerings. You don't have to stick in your group. We have sample from Amram, sample from Sisterhood, sample from all the different auxiliaries in the temple, because we have just a wonderful array of speakers. And we're so delighted that, Tommy, you could start us off this year in such a happy way. And
Thank you. I loved my Washington debut.
it was great. So everybody, you be safe, be well. Everyone be safe and well. And thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.